In the cacophonous theater of modern life, where opinion is currency and social validation is a relentless current, a singular figure moves with silence that speaks volumes. He is an enigma, often misunderstood, operating on a frequency distinct from the collective hum of society. This is a Sigma male, an archetype not of brute dominance or loud authority, but profound, self-contained sovereignty. His most formidable weapon is not his words, nor his connections, but the unparalleled precision and clarity with which he makes decisions. While the world around him becomes mired in the quicksand of analysis paralysis and the echo chambers of groupthink, he charts a course with quiet, unnerving certainty of a master navigator traversing familiar seas. This treatise delves into hidden architecture, the intricate psychological and philosophical framework that empowers this individual to cut through life's complexities with the deftness of a surgeon's scalpel. We will explore in exhaustive detail the 8 core principles that constitute his decision-making engine, revealing how any individual can cultivate such clarity and purpose in their own journey. The solitary crucible, the radical rejection of the committee mentality. The foundation of the Sigma male's decision-making framework is not defined by what he does, but rather by a fundamental principle of what he refrains from doing. He operates in a state of radical intellectual independence, systematically rejecting the pervasive committee mentality that dictates the choices of the majority. This is not an act of misanthropic arrogance or a baseless belief in his own infallibility. On the contrary, it is a deeply philosophical and pragmatic understanding of the nature of responsibility, accountability, and the inherent dilution of truth that occurs within collective deliberation, the tyranny of the collective and the dilution of outcome. In contemporary society, the default response to a significant life decision is to convene a council. We seek the opinions of friends over coffee, the wisdom of family around the dinner table, and the data points provided by colleagues in the break room. This behavior is rooted in a primal seeking of safety in numbers, the subconscious belief that a shared decision distributes the burden of potential failure. However, the Sigma male perceives a fatal flaw in this logic. A decision made by a committee is, by its very nature, a compromise one. It becomes a product of negotiation, of conflicting values, of unspoken social debts, and the lowest common denominator. The sharp, unique edges of potentially brilliant choice are sanded down to create a smooth, palatable, and ultimately mediocre outcome that pleases no one entirely and serves the true purpose of no single individual. The Sigma recognizes that when he is the one who will ultimately bear the full weight of the consequences, be it the euphoria of success or the sting of failure, the decision-making authority must reside with him and him alone. To outsource this profound responsibility is to live a life by proxy, a life shaped by the fears, biases, and limitations of others. He understands that seeking endless counsel is often merely a sophisticated form of procrastination, a way to delay the terrifying, exhilarating moment where one must stand alone and declare, "This is my path." Cultivating intellectual sovereignty and the feedback loop of self-reliance. This conscious abstention from group consultation is a disciplined practice that forges immense intellectual and emotional muscle. By refusing to poll his social circle on a career change, a geographical move, or a relational commitment, he is forced to engage in a deep, introspective dialogue with himself. He must confront his own fears, articulate his own desires, and weigh his own values without the crutch of external validation. This process, while initially more arduous, create a powerful, self-reinforcing feedback loop. Each decision made in solitude and its subsequent outcome, whether favorable or unfavorable, becomes a pure data point for his evolving judgment. There is no noise to filter, no one else to blame, and no diluted advice to obscure the lesson. A success reinforces his trust in his own assessment capabilities. A failure becomes a stark, undiluted masterclass in cause and effect, providing invaluable insights that sharpen his discernment for the next crossroads. Over time, this cultivates a profound sense of intellectual sovereignty. He becomes the final arbiter of his life, developing an inner compass so calibrated that the noisy opinions of crowd fade into irrelevant background static. His confidence is not born from a perfect track record, but from the unshakable knowledge that he is the architect of his own destiny, learning and evolving with every choice he courageously owns. 2. The inner compass, the pre-engineered value framework as a decision-making filter. Before the Sigma male ever encounters a specific dilemma at a life crossroads, his internal groundwork has already been laid. The most critical decisions are not made in the moment of crisis or opportunity. They are made in the quiet moments of reflection, long in advance. The Sigma operates from a pre-established, deeply integrated value system, a meticulously constructed internal compass that serves as his primary navigational tool. This framework is not a list of abstract ideals, but a functional, hierarchical set of core principles that act as a filtering mechanism for every choice he faces. The construction of a personal constitution. The process begins with a ruthless and honest interrogation of what is fundamentally, non-negotiably important to him. Is it absolute personal freedom, the relentless pursuit of truth and knowledge, continuous growth and self-mastery, deep, authentic connection, unassailable autonomy? He identifies these core values and codifies them into a sort of personal constitution. This is not a static document, but a living, breathing aspect of his consciousness. For example, his hierarchy might place freedom above comfort and truth above social harmony. This hierarchy is crucial as it provides a clear tie-breaking mechanism when values come into conflict, when a new option or challenge presents itself. He does not begin the exhausting process of listing pros and cons from a blank slate. Such an approach is mentally draining and susceptible to emotional manipulation and short-term thinking. Instead, he runs a potential choice through his pre-established value grid. The question is not merely, is this a good job offer? But rather, does this opportunity align with my core value of growth? Does it violate my principle of autonomy by imposing excessive control? How does it score on my metric of freedom? A high-paying corporate position might be financially attractive but fail the freedom and autonomy metric spectacularly, making the decision to decline almost automatic. Conversely, a risky entrepreneurial venture with lower initial pay might pass every filter related to growth, freedom, and truth, make it the clear and obvious choice despite superficial appearances, the automation of choice and the elimination of paralysis. This systematic application of a value framework effectively automates a vast range of life's decisions, liberating immense cognitive resources for more complex problems. The existential paralysis that plagues so many, the endless what-if scenarios and the fear of making the wrong choice, simply does not manifest for the Sigma. His foundational principles have already done the heavy deliberating for him. The path forward becomes illuminated not by fleeting emotions or social pressures, but by the unwavering light of his core self. This creates a life of remarkable consistency and integrity. His actions are not random or situational. They are coherent expressions of his deepest beliefs. While others are tossed on the waves of external opinion and changing circumstances, the Sigma male is the captain of a ship with a deep and weighted keel, moving forward with a purpose that appears mysterious to outsiders only because they lack access to the navigational chart he has so carefully drafted. His decisions are not reckless. They are pre-validated by the most authoritative source he knows, his own clearly defined and courageously lived value system. 3. The 70% threshold, the strategic calculus of imperfect information. Conventional wisdom, particularly in corporate and analytical cultures, preaches the gospel of comprehensive information gathering. The directive is to seek out every possible data point, analyze every potential risk, and achieve the highest possible level of certainty before committing to a course of action. The Sigma male recognizes his pursuit of perfect information for what it truly is, a myth and a dangerous one at that. His approach is governed by a more dynamic and pragmatic principle, the 70% rule, the law of diminishing returns in intelligence gathering. The Sigma understands that the relationship between information and effective decision-making is not linear. The initial 50 to 70% of readily available information provides a bulk of the necessary insight to understand the landscape, identify key variables, and make a reasonably informed choice. However, the pursuit of the remaining 20 to 30% of information is where the trap lies. This final fraction is often the most difficult, costly, and time-consuming to acquire. It involves chasing ambiguous signals, attempting to predict unpredictable human behavior, and seeking guarantees in a world that offers none. The critical insight is that the cost of acquiring this final portion of information, in terms of time, energy, and, most importantly, missed opportunity, often far exceeds a marginal benefit of the added certainty it provides. while others are stuck in analysis paralysis, seeking that one elusive report or that one final opinion that will magically make the decision for them. The Sigma recognizes that the window of opportunity is actively closing. The market shifts. The potential partner loses interest. The moment passes. The risk of inaction, therefore, becomes greater than the risk of acting with imperfect information. Momentum as a strategic asset. By committing to action once he has acquired approximately 70% of the relevant information, the Sigma male generates tremendous momentum in his life. This principle applies universally. In business, it means launching a product when it is good enough and iterating based on real-world feedback, rather than delaying for a mythical state of perfection. In personal development, it means starting a new fitness regimen or educational pursuit with a solid plan, rather than waiting for the ideal moment or the perfect set of circumstances. In relationships, it means having the difficult conversation when the core issue is understood, rather than waiting for flawless articulation. This habit transforms him from a passive analyst of life into an active participant and shaper of his own reality. He embraces the concept of sufficient intelligence and understands that the final pieces of the puzzle often only become visible after one has begun to move. Action itself generates new, higher quality information that was inaccessible from a stationary position of contemplation. This created a powerful flywheel effect. Decisive action leads to new data, which informs the next decisive action, propelling him forward at a velocity that those waiting for 100% certainty can never hope to match. His world is not one of static guarantees, but of dynamic adaptation, and his decision-making protocol is perfectly engineered for such an environment. For the governor of emotion, strategic detachment as a cognitive tool. Perhaps the most frequently misunderstood aspect of the Sigma male's character is his perceived emotional coldness. When he approaches a decision with a calm, analytical demeanor, even in situations charged with high personal stakes, he is often mislabeled as detached or unfeeling. This is a fundamental misreading of his internal process. What appears to be coldness is, in reality, a highly sophisticated and disciplined psychological maneuver, the temporary and strategic separation of emotion from analysis. This is not the absence of emotion, but its masterful governance. Emotion as data, not as director. The Sigma male possesses the same full spectrum of human emotions as anyone else. He feels anger in the face of betrayal, fear in the shadow of the unknown, joy in moments of triumph, and attachment in his relationships. The critical difference lies in how he relates to these emotional states during the decision-making process. He does not repress or ignore his feelings. Instead, he acknowledges them, honors their presence, and then consciously creates a space between the emotion itself and his cognitive assessment. He treats emotions as valuable data points about his internal state, not as commanders of his will. For instance, if a business partner acts in bad faith, he will fully feel the surge of anger and betrayal. However, he will not allow that anger to dictate a retaliatory or impulsive response. He will note the emotion, set it aside mentally, and then proceed to analyze the situation. What is the most strategically sound way to address this breach? What action best serves my long-term interests and aligns with my values? Similarly, when deeply invested in a romantic relationship, he does not let affection blind him to fundamental incompatibilities or red flags. The emotional connection is real, but it is not permitted to override the logical criteria necessary for a healthy, sustainable partnership, preventing the pitfalls of emotional reactivity. This emotional governance is a defensive mechanism against the most common and destructive decision-making errors. It inoculates him against revenge choices, decisions driven by spite or desire to inflict pain, which often backfire spectacularly, fear-based avoidance, the refusal to pursue opportunities or necessary confrontations due to anxiety, leading to stagnation, attachment-driven compromises, making concessions that erode one's core values and self-respect out of fear of loss or desire for harmony, euphoric overreach, making impulsive commitments or financial bets in a state of excitement or overconfidence. By granting his logical faculties temporary executive authority during the deliberation phase, the Sigma ensures that his choices are robust, principled, and designed to stand the test of time. They are not reactions to temporary emotional weather, but constructions built on the solid ground of his value framework and long-term strategy. Once a decision is made, he can fully re-engage with his emotional world, but the course is already set. This ability to honor his emotions without being enslaved by them is a superpower in a world increasingly driven by reactivity and sentiment. V. The calculus of inaction, quantifying the hidden cost of delay. The conventional risk assessment model focuses almost exclusively on the potential downsides of action. What if I fail? What if I lose my investment? What if I get rejected? The Sigma male employs a more comprehensive and forward-looking calculus. He gives equal and often greater weight to the hidden, insidious cost of inaction. He understands that the safest choice is not always the most prudent one, and that hesitation itself carries a heavy, compounding price. The ghost of future is foregone. While others are paralyzed by the potential losses associated with moving forward, the Sigma actively visualizes a landscape of loss created by standing still. He engages in a deliberate thought exercise, projecting himself into the future and asking a series of piercing questions. If I do not take this risk now, what will my life look like in 6 months? In 1 year? In 5 years? What opportunities will have permanently evaporated? What skills will I have failed to develop? What compound interest, financial, experiential, or relational, will I have failed to earn? This is not mere pessimism. It is a form of temporal accounting. When contemplating leaving a secure but unfulfilling job, he doesn't just weigh the paycheck he might lose. He quantifies the cost of his atrophying skills, the diminishing spark in his eyes, the quiet resentment that builds with each passing year, and the network he fails to build by staying in a stagnant pond. When hesitating to have a difficult but necessary conversation, he considers not only the immediate awkwardness but the long-term corrosion of the relationship, the building resentment, and the personal integrity sacrificed by staying silent, positioning for compound gains. This comprehensive cost-benefit analysis, which includes a cost of delayed action, consistently positions him to capture gains that the overly cautious never realize. It provides a necessary counterweight to the natural human tendency toward risk aversion. He recognizes that in a dynamic world, stagnation is a form of regression. By systematically choosing action over inaction when the long-term cost of delay is high, he ensures his life is on a trajectory of growth. He is willing to endure short-term volatility for long-term appreciation, be it in his career, his personal development, or his relationships. This forward-thinking calculation is the engine that propels him out of comfortable mediocrity and into the uncertain, but infinitely more rewarding realm of potential and growth. He would rather bet on himself and face a known failure than surrender to the guaranteed, slow-motion failure of never having tried at all. 6. The mental simulator, scenario visualization, and premortem analysis. The Sigma male does not navigate the future with blind optimism or naive hope. He approaches significant decisions with the rigor of a strategist preparing for a complex campaign. His tool of choice is sophisticated mental simulation, a process that goes far beyond simple daydreaming about success. His most powerful technique is the practice of premortem analysis, a counterintuitive exercise in imagining failure to engineer success, conjuring catastrophe to fortify strategy. Before committing to a major decision, a business venture, a marriage, a large investment, the Sigma conducts a formal premortem. He mentally fast-forwards to a point in the future, say 6 months or a year from now, and assumes that the decision has resulted in a spectacular, unequivocal failure. His task is then to work backward and answer the question, what must have happened for this failure to occur? What were the root causes? This is not an exercise in negative thinking. It is a stress test of the decision itself. By intentionally seeking out the vulnerabilities and potential failure modes, he can identify and address them before they manifest in reality. When considering a partnership, he doesn't just imagine the synergistic successes. He imagines a partnership dissolving in acrimony. What would cause that? Perhaps a poorly defined roles, a misalignment of long-term vision, or a lack of a clear exit clause. Identifying these potential pitfalls allows him to build safeguards into the partnership agreement from the outset. When contemplating a major purchase like a house, he visualizes a state of buyer's remorse. What would cause that? Perhaps the commute is draining, the neighborhood is changing, or the maintenance costs are higher than anticipated. This mental simulation tests his commitment and forces a more realistic assessment of the downsides, forging robust and resilient choices. The outcome of this practice is a decision that is not a fragile bet on everything going right, but a robust, resilient plan that can withstand the bumps and shocks of an unpredictable world. His choices are anti-fragile, to borrow a term from Nassim Taleb. They have mechanisms built in to benefit from volatility and unforeseen events. By having already stared failure in the face and deconstructed its anatomy, he removes much of its emotional power. The fear of the unknown is replaced with prepared mind. When obstacles inevitably arise, they are not terrifying surprises, but familiar challenges he has already anticipated and planned for. This habit ensures his path forward is not a hopeful leap, but a well-reconnoitered advance. 7. The sunk cost liberator, the R of the strategic retreat. Human psychology is notoriously vulnerable to the sunk cost fallacy, the irrational tendency to continue investing in an endeavor, relationship, or a project based on the cumulative prior investment, time, money, emotion already made, rather than a clear-eyed assessment of its future potential. The Sigma male has trained himself to recognize and surgically excise this cognitive bias from his decision-making process. His ability to walk away is one of his most formidable strengths. The clean slate mental model. When evaluating an ongoing commitment, the Sigma consciously performs a mental reset. He asks himself a simple but profoundly difficult question. If I were coming into the situation fresh today, with no prior investment, no time spent, no money lost, no emotional history, knowing what I know now, would I still choose to invest in this? This conceptual framework effectively neutralizes the emotional gravity of past investments. It forces a decision to be based purely on forward-looking potential, rather than backward-looking attachments. This clear-eyed assessment allows him to cut losses that others persist with due to pride, sentiment, or an inability to admit a mistake. He can look at a failing business venture and, despite having poured years of his life and his savings into it, acknowledge that it is no longer viable. He can assess a deteriorating relationship and, despite a long history, recognize that it has become fundamentally unhealthy and is unlikely to recover. He can abandon a creative project that is going nowhere, despite the hundreds of hours already invested, preventing the slow drain on resources. This principle prevents the slow, quiet drains on his most precious resources, time, energy, and focus. Persisting with a diminishing return situation for emotional reasons is, in his calculus, a form of self-sabotage. The resources being poured into a loss cause our resources that are being stolen from new, potentially fruitful endeavors. His ego is not tied to seeing every initial decision through to the bitter end. His loyalty is not to his past choices, but to his future well-being and growth. By being willing to make a strategic retreat, he liberates himself from the anchors of the past and keeps his resources fluid and available for the next genuine opportunity. He understands that the ability to quit is just as important as the ability to persist, and the wisdom to know the difference is paramount. 8. The temple of the mind, governing the physical and mental state for optimal choice. The final and often most overlooked secret of the Sigma male's decision-making prowess lies in his recognition that the quality of decision is profoundly influenced by the state of the vessel in which it is made, his own body and mind. He understands that cognitive function is not a constant. It fluctuates with biological rhythms, nutritional status, emotional charge, and fatigue levels. He has therefore developed a deep awareness of his own physical intelligence and actively governs his decision-making environment, the awareness of state-dependent cognition. The Sigma is a meticulous observer of his own internal weather patterns. He knows that his willpower is highest in the morning, that his analytical sharpness wanes when he is hungry, that his risk tolerance increases when he is tired, and that his emotional resilience plummets when he is stressed. He never makes important decisions when he is in a recognizably suboptimal state. An angry email composed in a moment of fury, a financial commitment made when exhausted, a life-altering choice contemplated in a state of grief. These are the classic decision-making errors he systematically avoids. He schedules important deliberations for his personal peak performance windows. He understands that what seems like a brilliant insight at 2 a.m. might be revealed as a foolish impulse in the clear light of day. This is the practical application of the admonition to sleep on it. He is not procrastinating. He is allowing his subconscious mind to process complex information and his body to restore its cognitive baseline. The rituals of cognitive clarity. This physical awareness is supported by deliberate rituals. If he notices himself becoming agitated or clouded before a needed decision, he will deliberately interrupt the process. He might take a long walk in nature to clear his mind, ensuring that the rhythmic motion and change of scenery resets his mental state. He will ensure he is properly nourished and hydrated before sitting down to analyze important matters. He practices mindfulness or other centering techniques to create distance from reactive emotions. By governing his decision environment as carefully as his decision process, he ensures that his choices emerge from his clearest, most capable, and most integrated self. He is not a passive recipient of his own biochemical fluctuations. He is the active steward of the temple from which his will and judgment emanate. This final principle acts as a quality control filter, ensuring that the other 7 secrets are executed from a place of strength and clarity, not from a compromised and volatile internal state. Conclusion: the integrated system of sovereign choice. These 8 decision-making secrets, the solitary crucible, the inner compass, the 70% threshold, the governor of emotion, the calculus of inaction, the mental simulator, the sunk cost liberator, and the temple of the mind, do not operate in isolation. They form a deeply integrated, self-reinforcing system, a complete philosophy of engagement with the world. What appears from the outside as mysterious, almost supernatural certainty is, upon examination, the product of disciplined habit, profound self-awareness, and a courageous commitment to personal responsibility. The Sigma male's advantage is not predicated on a superior IQ, privileged information, or special favor from fortune. It is available to anyone who is willing to undertake the challenging but liberating work of cultivating these principles. It requires the discipline to think for oneself, the courage to define one's own values, the wisdom to act without perfect information, the strength to govern one's emotions, the foresight to account for the cost of inaction, the humility to imagine failure, the detachment to walk away from sunk costs, and the self-awareness to make choices only from a place of clarity. This is the hidden architecture behind the Sigma male's remarkable ability to navigate life's complexities. It is the blueprint for a life of purpose, precision, and unshakable sovereignty. Do these ideas resonate with you? If you found yourself nodding along or reflecting deeply on the traits and experiences we explored in this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts. The Sigma male mindset isn't often talked about openly, and your perspective, whether you identify with it personally or have encountered in others, adds valuable depth to the conversation. Drop a comment below and let me know, which part hit home the most for you? Have you seen these traits in yourself or someone you know? Your insights help build a community where authenticity and growth are prioritized over popularity and performance. If you're drawn to this kind of introspective, no-nonsense content around Sigma males, psychological strength, emotional intelligence, and high-value living, there's more waiting for you. Explore the other videos on this channel for deeper dives, actionable insights, and raw truths that cut through the noise. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay sharp, stay grounded, and stay unapologetically real. Until next time.